And we're back, Stripe Show podcast, on a special Thursday as the Travelers Championship gets underway up in TPC River Highlands. Nice field, although we're getting a couple late withdrawals, so we'll have to see how that pans out, with next week, of course, being the second event on the Live Series. So it feels like we've got another announcement or two with players, but we'll see. Special podcast here today, Thursday. We like to keep it in instruction. And of course, the man right now that everyone's talking about as he makes his media tours here in the United States is the U.S. Open champion, Matthew Fitzpatrick. Had a really good podcast on Monday with Sasha McKenzie, who has helped Matt from a speed standpoint with his stack system. If you didn't listen to that, you need to go back and check that out. It was really, I thought, a good one. Sasha was sharing a lot of great insight and information from a speed training standpoint. But the guy that made the call to Sasha is man sitting here today with me, coming from Liverpool, England. He is the longtime head coach mastermind to Mr. Matthew Fitzpatrick, and that is Mike Walker. How you doing, man?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, no, this is cool. First off, congratulations. I know this has been a long time coming. I mean, you know, Matthew's 27 years of age, and you've literally been coaching him half his life from a golf perspective, which I think is quite cool. You know, I think of Cam Smith, who has been with Grant Field in Australia pretty much his whole career. I think of Justin Thomas and his dad pretty much his whole career. I think of John Rahm and his coach back in Spain. You know, there's a lot of these stories where these guys have stuck with their coach, you know, from when they were young. So this has to be, as you're looking back on this win from the U.S. Open, it has to be quite gratifying to you to see your boy win the U.S. Open.
Yeah, I mean, to say the very least. I mean, I've said a couple of times this week. I think any of the other guys that I coach would understand when I say it's probably right up there as the most satisfying victory I've ever been lucky enough to have. And I think it's more of a journey that you've been on all the way through the ups and the downs, and not that there's been many downs with him, to be honest. He's kind of made a gradual ascent that's been consistent. But yeah, I was just, and especially with him, his character being so ultra dedicated, you know how much it means to him as well. So it's just really, really immensely satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's had a lot of success, of course, as a young junior. Coming from England, 8 Euro wins. I mean, I don't think people realize that. You know, we talk about it a lot with the players here. I mean, Fitzpatrick's had 8 wins on the European tour. And of course, the knock on him, if you will, was, well, he hasn't won in the United States. And you could see him coming, and you could see the growth and the improvement that you speak to. But then you think, well, I mean, he won the U.S. Amateur in 2013. And then, of course, he goes back to that same course, stays with the same family, which ironically, his last name is Fulton. We're not related. I had a few DMs come over to me. And then, you know, he wins, of course, the 2022 U.S. Open. So, you know, quite the journey with a lot of winning in there. And I'm sure a monkey off his back to get not only the major, but to win here in the United States. Give us a little insight about Matthew, the person, as he's grown here into this young man. To me, he seems very dedicated, and right now, in many ways, like his golf is his life. Is that accurate?
Totally accurate. Yeah, he's never really been anything other than dedicated to his craft. He comes from good stock, as we would say in the UK. Good. His parents are great people. And they've instilled a lot of like great values in him, and he's always been like that. He's never really partied the way we all can be tempted to at kind of those pivotal ages, and and he's always been like super dedicated. It is kind of how you imagine him. I think it is the reality of it. So much so, I think me and the rest of his team at times have more often tried to encourage him like into other areas of interest, and to try and just take the heat off his golf. It becomes a little bit asphyxiating at times, I would say, because it's literally all he does. And I'm a hypocrite because I've been like that in times in my working career. But yeah, he's just the ultimate professional. More so than I mean, I've worked with quite a lot of European Tour or DP World Tour players and some PGA Tour players, and I've never come across anybody as dedicated as him.
Yeah, his friend Daniel Rappaport, comes on the podcast once a month with Golf Digest. He's very good friends with the family. And,
that's right. I know Dan. Yeah.
Yeah, and he told the story that I believe it was about 4 months ago. His Matthew's good friend was going to have a bachelor party, and his buddies were going to come down. And Matt's like, "Hey, you can stay at my house, but I'm not going to partake in the shenanigans. I'll have dinner and this and that, but I'm not going to go partake." And sure enough, he didn't do anything. The guy stayed at the house. They were up till 2 a.m. And I mean, that's the kind of discipline that Matt has. Now, look, he's got to go buy a nice car, right? He's got to go, tell Matthew, look, go buy yourself a Ferrari or something.
He's already done that before this, which was very out of character, but yeah, I mean, when he first came out on tour, he was renowned for a bust-up old Ford Mondeo that he still was driving to tournaments. So that was out of character in itself. So yeah, I don't know what he'll spend his money on. I don't know. He should treat himself on something.
Now, all this fame now in the United States, he's going to have some people following him and some ladies and, and this and that. So we'll have to see how it kind of pans out here for Mr. Fitzpatrick, because he's probably the most singular bachelor in the world right now, right? I mean, he's the man right now, and there's a lot of people that want his digits.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I can't teach him anything about that, that's for sure.
Let's talk about his game. I had Sasha on, and it's funny. Speed is king right now. When I was young and got in playing and then into the teaching business 22 years ago, it was like fairways and greens, right? Like, let's control the face. Let's, I was telling Sasha, like, let's keep it 3/4 and let's hit the green, and keep it in front of us. Never in my youth was I really encouraged to or thought about, I'm going to wind this thing up and see how hard I can hit it. Let alone speed training. And that's what we hear now, right? And his system, the stack system, I've known about it a while. When him and Chris Como put it out there, I got one and was using it, and you have used it with some players, and it's very effective. You made the call to Sasha, right? To take a look at Matthew and address his speed for more distance. Talk about how that whole thing transpired, and then now how it's evolved into what really is 12 to 15 more yards for Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I grew up in a period where it came with like danger associated with it, and I kind of was brought up. I guess we're similar ages, or I was brought up in the same with the same mentality. But for me personally, it was. I remember walking around originally at Erin Hills. I was thinking like this when the US Open, but then at Augusta, I think it must have been 2020 or something. He played with Brooks and Justin Thomas, and I was at the side of the 11th hole, and he hit an unbelievable 7-wood into the 11th, and he had like 20 feet, but the other two guys were like flicking whatever they had, the 7-irons, and I remember walking off there, and he didn't play great that week either. But I just thought, from a coaching standpoint, it doesn't matter how much or how straight I can get him to hit his 7-wood. It's kind of got my hands tied, or our hands tied behind our backs, really. So anyway, that was I knew Sasho through other people in the industry, other peers who are kind of friends of mine, Mark Blackburn, Kev Duffy. etc. And then it was on their kind of recommend, and Chris Como, like you say, and I did a bit of kind of research on Sasho, and we kind of reached out to him and asked him to see us for a day and see how we get on. And it was, I had the same reservations. Like I was conscious you have this like massive responsibility as a coach for someone, and you obviously don't want to mess anything up. But we did that, and then so we met up with him, and I think like the speed training that he's done with Sasho is rightly getting a lot of attention. But from my point of view, and from like Matt's physical trainer Matt Roberts, it wasn't all plain sailing throughout the process. And when he first started doing it, he started stumbling across some neck injuries at times through doing it. So his trainer Matt Roberts was like working on him with physio wise. And don't get me wrong, I think he was a bit sensitive to, like, golfers, I would say, as a race are quite sensitive to training, more so than more athletic sports. But and when you look at Matt, I mean, only last week they were showing lots of like parallel photos from the US amateur, and you don't realize. I mean, he looks not that big now, but he was tiny then, and so
yeah, he looks bigger to me. He does, yeah, for sure.
He is substantially bigger, and I think that the training that he's done over kind of however long, 5 years or whatever it is, with Matt, give him a robustness to be to achieve the potential that he has whilst like doing the speed training all the time. And then from my end, there was also certainly at the start, I got the impression that Sasho was you could have done it in different ways. So if Matt turned around and said like, all right, I want to be a world long drive champion, then you could have explored avenues, and I sense that there was that Sasho was keen to at least explore changing his pattern somewhat, to achieve the gains that he wanted. But I was slightly reserved about it, and I really wasn't convinced that Matt, by doing the things that he needed to do to achieve his absolute max speed, I'm not convinced you would have heard of him again. So
right.
We basically embarked on a path where he retained his existing kind of golfing swing DNA, and then basically overspeed, underspeed training, and then that complements like a pretty rigorous gym program, and then physio if the neck did flare up at any time, and which it did, and Matt kind of put the brakes on it at different points throughout. And from my end, it definitely came with its troubles sometimes, because he originally started doing it, and he got the instructions from Sasha, like, it's not a golf club, it's just you're swinging something, an implement, as fast as you can possibly swing it. So forget hitting fairways, but I started seeing it kind of come through on camera, and things that he was doing, like particularly with driver, that weren't necessarily ideal. So it did have its stumbling blocks, but obviously the benefits of it are there for everyone to see. And I always, like I said at the start, I always felt that if I could or if Matt could get even 10 yards more, and the statistics guys were all saying the same thing, and he retained his accuracy, then you could get him into a ballpark where he can compete with all these, because they're all so good, aren't they? And a lot of his kind of peers within the top 20 in the world, they're big guys. Genetically, they've been given more than Matt had in that sense. So yeah, that's a resume of it, really.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting here is for the audiences, as you know, Mike speaks to this, and you know, my coaching pedigree, and talking with other coaches who have been down this path, like Chris Como. I remember when he first started down this path with Bryson, I had him on and we were talking through it, and you can hear the concern of, okay, yeah, let's go down this path, but we have to got to leave some, to use his words, breadcrumbs along the way to make sure we can find our way back and be willing to pump the brakes a little when a neck or something starts to occur. Because it is a sensitive thing. It doesn't always work. I mean, I think you could argue with Jordan Spieth, it didn't work. Now he's come back out and he's longer, but he really sacrificed probably 2.5, 3 years of his career, from going down that path, neglecting other parts of his game, lost his putter. Like, you become more it's acceptable to other parts of your game, right? All of a sudden, I'm not putting as much. I'm not hitting my irons as much because I'm speed training and I'm doing all this and I get consumed in that. So you have to, it's a sensitive thing. And one of the things that it appeared to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I did a video on this. I want to bring in Matt's swing here. This is, of course, his driver swing. And is it fair to say that as he started training, and Sasha was talking about as he started recruiting more speed, that all of a sudden, he started getting a deeper hip turn. The club got longer at the top. It looked like his right elbow kind of got away, but it also appeared to be, Mike, the club got a little more inside, and then the shaft got a little bit more down the line, versus an older Matt video would show the club head a little more out in front of him initially, and then the shaft perhaps a bit more laid off at the top. Is it fair to say this first move, like the club head started getting a bit more in, and then the shaft longer and more down the line at the top?
Yes and no. I would say, well, I saw those videos. I think there was quite a bit of influence of like where the camera was pointing, but you are right in what you're seeing. Like, don't get me wrong. But I was actually, it's hard to say definitively which one was kind of more predominant in that situation, because I was working on similar things in Matt's iron play at the time. I kind of have jokes with Matt all the time that he lives in a two-dimensional world, so he's always trying to keep the club in front of him in the wrong way, so to speak. But so that video that you've got up there right now is more things that I've been trying to do to improve his iron play, because his approach play was statistically not where we wanted it to be the previous year, and certainly the amount of left wrist extension and radial deviation in his left wrist has massively influenced those positions as well. Now, in the same way, he feels that is more of an iron swing. He almost feels like he's got two different swings. His driver was performing really well last year, and he just kind of almost kept that in the same. But as Sasho said in his podcast, things organically kind of drift, and they're all affecting each other simultaneously all the time. But certainly the fact that it looked like less laid off at the top, I would attribute that as much as anything to the change in his kind of left, things that we've done in his left wrist. But then there's no doubt that it definitely started having more depth in the movement as a consequence of using that stack system. And I think he got a lot more like stretch shortening in his left shoulder as well, on the back of it.
Yeah. So this shaft.
He was.
Sorry. Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say that this club shaft here that we have in the ground here, this alignment stick that's coming up on an angle, that is to keep the club head a little more out in front of him in the initial phases. Is that what you're doing here? And then this radial deviation in the left wrist, or cupping for the audience. Let's see if I can get it in the video there. There we go. Right. So there we go. Left wrist. So that is more at the top, right? And that goes comfortably with his strong grip, Mike, because I get a lot of questions about that with his grip. His grip is quite strong as well.
Yeah, I mean that's something I've never touched. I've just worked with that, and as a general rule, I would try and match wrist movements to grips rather than change grips. Other people might be different to me, but that's something that's like unique to him. That well, not totally unique to him, but it's quite unique in how strong it is. But it's always been that way, and I've always just tried to match the grip to it, the wrist movement to it, should I say? And but where I felt where he was struggling was he would get a lot of he struggled to control his radius. So this is more for his iron play. His radius in terms of like striking at the bottom and the top of the face all the time. And he always wanted to kind of extend that left wrist all the time because he never wanted it to go left. And I kind of battled with him a bit too because I didn't feel that was the issue and that was the reason that happened. And eventually he kind of really bought into using much less radial and extension in that left wrist, and it immediately helped him control his strike a lot better. And he would, because he grew up in a golf course in the UK that's on the top of a hill. It's always windy. He was always like brought up trapping the ball. I mean, when he was a kid at 15, he was hitting like 6 to 8 down on his driver. I mean, he was bullet straight.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but in his formative years, could be the nature of the kind of environment that he kind of was brought up in, he hit significantly down on the driver. I mean, he gained a lot of speed purely over the years. It's gradually shallowed out, and that had a massive influence on his distance.
Yeah, you can see it with his pivot, right? Like, is this kind of part of maybe growing up in England that he, the sternum would be kind of on top of the ball, right? And he's not moving off the ball per se, right? He's not a lot of side, right?
Yeah, you would think so, but it's actually that's actually not the case with regards to his pivot. So his pivot is something that we've actually tried to keep more centered, and certainly to feel. So that is where, say, with Sasho, for example, from a theoretical standpoint, you could increase. I mean, this is very technical, but you could increase like the moment arm that he has in the frontal plane by him moving off the ball and dumb that down, have more lateral movement in that. But whenever Matt moves off the ball too much, he doesn't get back. He actually goes further off it in his transition. So he's actually been feeling more pressure under his left foot, which is, again, theoretically speaking, would be robbing him of distance. And it's like we said at the start, it's always spinning plates. You're trying to trade off distance, but obviously you want to hit fairways too. I think the whole industry's got better. The people like Sasho and trainers like Matt Roberts that Matt uses and other trainers and my other peers within the teaching industry, I'd say our knowledge is all getting better, and it's getting us more and more armed to be able to do things like this. Because it always, like we said at the start, it was always a bit of a no-no years ago, wasn't it? It was.
So even so, like historically, Matthew would kind of move off the ball too much, and you've been trying to keep him more centered. Am I hearing you right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then even with his driver, like, is he even like through this speed training, he's feeling still pretty centered? He's not moving off to it. Like, what's his attack angle right now after the speed training? Is he still hitting down one, or is it leveled out?
No, that would already leveled out. He would before he even did that. He would be, obviously it varies some, but he would typically be 0 to 2 up on it. Now.
Well, that's significant, right?
But yeah, it is something that I've been.
That's significant.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've got in hindsight, I should have sent you a video from years ago at World Golf Championships where he was one where he got moving off it too much, and then as he's coming down, he basically shoved his pelvis back towards the ball, but his upper center of gravity went even further back, and then his left foot comes way off the floor, and he just hit snap hooks. So we've been working for a few years now of getting more pelvis and depth in his backswing, and then certainly in transition getting more and more pressure into that left foot as he's coming down, basically.
Yeah, that deeper, the depth is kind of what I was in the video, I think is apparent, right, through the speed training with him, and kind of it working deeper and
Yeah, that's something that we were already working on. I would
Yeah.
say it maybe got more pronounced when he did the speed training, but that's something that was already I would say there prior to him, or certainly on the way there prior to him doing that.
So the checkpoints right now is, I mean, he's in a great spot. And then I want to go to this chipping motion with you, which I think was kind of really blowing people's minds. Like
Yeah.
like he hits these cross-handed uh, chips, and he's just a brilliant chipper of the ball. So we'll get to that here in a second. But right now, if your checkpoints when you guys are exchanging texts or video, because Matthew's in just a wonderful spot right now. I mean, he seems to be, things have come together, right? You've managed it beautifully. And I think what's really cool here is people listen to this is it's not a pill. Like you don't take a pill and all of a sudden, oh, I'm longer and straighter. Like I got it. Like there's this process that you work through. And part of that process is the struggle and things kind of get off track. And you're the president and the master, the manager of all this, right? And you're making sure that, yeah, we need a little more of Matt here, Roberts, to step in and kind of fix the neck, and maybe a little less of what we're doing speed training. And then, you know what, I need to get the club a little more here. And so I think it's really cool to hear that as you go through this with a player, that there's moments that you have to pull back, got to manage a situation. It's not a pill, and all of a sudden I'm 15 yards longer, and oh yeah, I'm straight too, and I'm confident. There's this journey and there's discovery, I would assume, with the player, where the player has to then kind of own it, and all of a sudden the lights come on, and it's like, yeah, I've got it. I'm longer, but I feel confident, and I'm very tuned in to the sensitivity of what I'm doing, right? And it's not a guess. I know I can repeat this over and over again and take it to the course, right? Because that's what Matthew's got to take it to the course. He's got to be able to be comfortable and take the speed and play golf and take it to the course. And it just seems like in the last 2 months, all of this has come on. So the checklist right now is what would you say when you're watching him hit balls? It's, I got to make sure it's, there's A and B, or is there a C? What is that checklist in place where he's hitting now on all cylinders?
From you mean the whole thing, or you mean
Yeah,
just his goal?
as the manager of the whole thing, you're just like, man, I kind of, if we're good here, then or is it still kind of this whole puzzle that you're still kind of having to keep your hands on all of it?
No, I think obviously maybe I would be seen as overseeing it to some extent, but the reality is it's one of the best teams I've ever worked in. It will. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's a great team of people behind Matt that all, broadly speaking, get on really, really well. Obviously, you're working kind of with each other, and you might have some disagreements at times. But I mean, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've never worked in a better team. So you've got, and what in coming back to your question, it's quite professional as well. So we have regular lines of communication, sit down meetings, and it all gets discussed so that everybody is broadly speaking on the same page. And then I don't know what you think, Travis, but I mean I've been teaching on tour for about 15 years, and I feel like you, even in that relatively short time period, my job is different now to when I started it. I feel like you've got to have a decent working knowledge of psychology, anatomy, biomechanics, training, all these things to not that I'm an expert in any of those areas, but I like to think I have a relatively good working knowledge, because because teams have got bigger, and you're coming across experts like Sasho, like Matt Roberts, like he's got a performance director, Steve Robinson. He's got somebody that helps him psychologically. He's got Eduardo Molinari, statistically. So it makes it much easier, miles easier to be able to kind of oversee that, and when to kind of act, pull things in, push things out, whatever that case may be. And I always use the same analogy. It's like spinning plates. You just kind of trying to make them all spin, and if one starts wobbling a bit, then you spin that one a bit harder. And it's but it is a great team. It really is a great team. And I don't think I mentioned Billy, then the caddy, and I mean,
Foster, yeah.
And he's been huge for Matt as well.
Yeah, that was cool. He gets his major championship win.
And Phil Kenyon. Sorry, I forgot Phil.
Yeah,
Phil would crucify me for not mentioning him.
My goodness, Fitzpatrick has a big team. Jeez.
Yeah.
There's no room for a girl or anything. I mean, he's got all the beds are taken.
That's true. I'm not commenting on his love life.
Well, you sound like Jamie Mulligan, who is the coach to Cantlay and Luke Litt. I mean, like that's how Jamie.
I know Jamie.
Yeah, him and I've had this conversation a couple times, and like just how things have changed. Like, before you're kind of this technique. Now, I mean, Jamie's like running the business. He's like, I'm running. Cantlay's got kind of the same thing going on with coaches, and so he's got his area of expertise, but he's got knowledge in all of it too, and can help steer the ship and spin the plate. So that's well said on how coaching has changed from an instructor to an overall coach. All right, let's finish up with this video right here. Check this out. I'm going to bring this in. So I posted this, and the idea was, I was like, try to watch this video just once. I mean, it's impossible, right? It's like one of those videos you look at and you're like, wait, what the hell did I just watch there? Is his left hand lower than his right? It's funny. When I played college golf, I played with a guy by the name of Craig Welty, and his dad, ironically, was a huge in our industry, Carl Welty, in the United States, in the Seattle area. Big influence on Jim McLean and others. And I played with his son in college, and this is how he hit every shot. When I first played with him, I was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen anything like it. And he'd really freak me out around the greens. Like he'd get in the bunker and hit a cross-handed bunker shot. I mean, I couldn't even watch it. It just didn't even look right. But now, like you see this a little bit more now. Like this is something that is showing up more and more. Give us the background of this left hand low chipping motion.
Well, I think you're right. I think it freaks everybody out because everybody associates it with like migrating a task away from a yippee action. And that wasn't the case with Matt. So I don't know how much you know about my background. I originally was coached by Pete Cowan and then worked and still work with him. And this would be kind of a trademark Pete Cowan chipping drill. So that was how it originated. Matt doing a drill, but it was one of those situations where it would come out, especially when he did it in long grass in the rough, and that's what the Brits always struggle with when they go to like overseas and they're faced with different grasses to what we get here. They struggle in that to get the consistency. I mean, everybody struggles, right? But he found it much easier with cack-handed. Anyway, so he started using it in the rough, and then last year, I think I said earlier, the two weaknesses statistically were his approach play, or relative weaknesses, were his approach play and his chipping. But nobody would ever class him as a bad chipper. So I went out to the Bears Club at the first week of January this year, and I prepared on the flight. I'd been comparing his regular action with his cack-handed action, and I'd come up with a big list of like slight differences that I saw, which is what made it more successful. So I kind of present this to Matt, and he turned around to me and said, well, yeah, but I don't have to think about it the other way. And I was like, well, what do I say to that? There's no answer to that. So then in typical Matt style, he then, in collaboration with his performance coach, Steve, he collected a load of data. He tested them one against the other over a month because he had a month off, and one was like however many 1.76 feet closer on average, and so he said, I think I'm going to put it in. Well, why would I not? Statistically it's better. So everybody kind of gasps at that point. But then, like I said, it wasn't like he was getting the yips on his chipping. But everybody perceived it that way. He's just had, well, conversely, he had the strength of character to put it in. Because you're setting yourself up for a fall, aren't you? Really, and then so it's great that. And I was actually at the side of the green on 12 on the Thursday when he chipped in, and that was some chippy at there. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and Matt seems to me like you're not just gonna tell him, hey, I think we should do this. I mean, you're gonna have to prove it. I mean, he seems like it's gonna have to be proven, and he seems quite stubborn to me as well. Is that like there's a stubbornness there to really all these players, right? Like they all have that deep competitive drive, but then they're kind of stubborn, right? And like it's not just, hey, take this, we're gonna do this and try it, and all of a sudden put in place. No, I'm gonna test it. I'm gonna, like it's gonna have to work its way in. But when it's proven and it makes sense, and it's like, yeah, okay, I can put that in play, then off it goes. Is there a little stubbornness to Matt too, like most of these players?
Yeah, and I mean he's 27 now. He's got his own mind, and only he. I know what you're saying. Some more stubborn than others. Matt kind of has an independent mind, an adult mind now, and he's his own man. He feels what he feels, and he's had a lot of success even before that last week. And yeah, he's data driven, so it takes the emotion out of certain things a lot of the time. So he's driven by what's on paper in front of him, and that's how he's plugged so many gaps over the years, using that. And yeah, fair play to him. I think it's the old saying, isn't it? It's only crazy until it works.
Yeah. So last question, what's next now as you look ahead? I mean, he's climbed the mountain per se, right? I mean, like sometimes you hear with these athletes, like the grind, they love the grind. They love the process, right? Of getting better and listening to experts, and just the whole process is fun and it's addicting. And then all of a sudden it's like, I just won the US Open. Holy shit. Like I'm on top of the world right now. Like I've just won one of the biggest tournaments in the world, major championship. My name is next to Tiger and Jack and all these guys on this trophy. Is there any fear that I've climbed the mountain and time to let off the brake a little bit? Or is it, nope, we're just getting
not with him.
Yeah.
No, not with him. He loves winning, basically. So like wish me luck, because that's all he's going to be satisfied with from now. But no, I think knowing Matt, I think he'll enjoy it for a limited time period, and then it'll be just straight back to it. And the only thing, I mean, I think you could see it in his face. It was like Christmas Day, and I think from the contact I've had with him since, it's like Christmas morning every morning since, and it's almost like a drug, that feeling of elation. And once it dies down, it'll take longer than normal, I would say, to die down, but once it dies down, I think he'll just be craving it again. And I think I mean Henrik Stenson sent me a message congratulating me afterwards, and he said, now the challenge begins. And I thought that what stuck with me for some reason. I think he might be tarring him with his own brush there, but yeah, I think Matt will definitely just carry on. He seems to have created a new goal of 6 majors since I last saw him. So I think somebody must have asked him about Nick Faldo's record, and he's designed that as a new goal. So,
well, he's done a great job of them. I mean, you could see the steady improvement even before the win of the US Open. I mean, the statistics were there. I mean, you could see the length coming. I think his short game has gotten better. Like, strokes gained total this year, for the most part, he's been the best. I mean, I know Scheffler's won 4 times.
Yeah, I think Rory just went in front of him when he won, I think. Okay. But but like you say, to that point, I think he was first, which is incredible. Yeah.
I mean, that's just incredible. It just speaks to all these layers you've been talking about with these teams, and Phil Kenyon and putting, and the job that you're doing and managing the speed with Sasho and Matt Roberts and his role. And who was the performance coach you mentioned?
He's Steve Robinson.
Steve Robinson
works
yeah.
with the English Golf Union back at home, and he works with and he seems to. He's a coach as well, but I think he seems to through his work with the governing bodies in the UK, he's got a good grasp of kind of performance coaching, practice plans and things. So, and then there's Eduardo Molinari as well, doing statistics. And I think then there's Billy, and then I think that's it. I think. Apologies to whoever it is I've left out if there is somebody else.
Well, I think in conclusion here, like you have to celebrate guys right now like Matt and Scotty Scheffler and Rory and JT and Rahm, and because unfortunately I think we've reached a time in professional golf where like this live is taking a little bit of the spirit out of it, the competitive nature out of it, right? Where you have guys who maybe later in their career are wanting to maximize payment, and you can't fault them for that. But the attitude of, I think, being paid for what I felt like I was worth before and what I'm worth now takes away from that pure competitive spirit of being the very best I can be. And I think with the PGA Tour, that spirit, Matthew encompasses it, is that grind of competing, wanting to win. And money is important, but it's like 4 or 5 down the list. It's not number one. And hopefully that stays intact here over these next couple years, with the landscape of professional golf. So Mike, I appreciate your time. Congratulations. And let's do this again as Matthew rolls off his next 5 major championships.
Yeah. I hope you're right. Yeah.
All right, buddy. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me on.